Good morning. Welcome, everyone. We're getting started here. I'm sure there'll be a few more people who will be rolling in late. That's normal for us. Welcome here. There's a number of new faces once again, so after the service, make sure you find out who people are, what they're doing here. Yeah, I'm glad you're here. You that are joining us at home, thank you for getting up and getting your coffee or tea. Hopefully you're able to do that. Of course, as always, there's a nice table here that you're missing out. But to remind you, it might be good to get early on Sunday morning and have your breakfast here, and you can save a little money and have breakfast on the church. Hopefully the coffee is strong enough. If not, let me know, because coffee ought to be good. Okay, often church coffee is the worst coffee, and we don't want that to be true at Communitas. But anyway, once again, welcome here. Thanks for being here. We'll be looking at Galatians. We've been in a series in Galatians, and a verse that will be more relevant to the sermon next Sunday is Galatians 5:1. Paul says, "It's for freedom that Christ has set us free. So stand firm and don't go back. Don't go back to the old ways, especially of living by a bunch of rules, of letting the rules be kind of the focus of your life. Especially don't be burdened again by a yoke of slavery." And one of the things that often burdens people is the sense of, am I okay? Am I worthy? Am I okay to be here? Am I okay with God, or am I okay with other people? And of course, often many of us who maybe don't have the highest self-esteem are burdened with feeling we don't measure up to other people. Many of you have grown up in church, and maybe many of us have grown up in churches where we kind of got a subtle message of you might not measure up with God, and God just might not be really happy with you. And a lot of the message today will be about why we don't need to be burdened in that way. There might be legitimate burdens, okay, but we don't need to be burdened with the thought whether or not we are welcome to God, okay? And one of the things I often like to say here on Sunday morning is that if you're here, it's probably not an accident, okay? And you might have had many reasons why you came today. Some you have a lot of friends here. It's a joyful time to come here. Maybe you were skeptical to come. You decided at the last minute. Maybe you didn't want to come, but for whatever reason you're here. And it's not likely to be an accident. Okay, if you are here this morning, my assumption is that maybe God had a reason for you to be here, and therefore you are welcome. You're certainly welcome, in this community, but I want you to sense that you are welcome by God, that God is interested in you, and whoever you think you are, okay, it's okay with God. God is not put off by who we are, okay? And if you knew everything about me, you would wonder why you came here, with me doing what I'm doing, okay? But here I am, and God's given me a job, and God's brought you here. Okay, and so let's not be burdened with that. Let's just accept the fact that God welcomes you here, and He's got a good purpose in mind. So Lord, I pray that we would sense that freedom this morning, that we would feel free in our hearts and minds and our spirits, that you would free our voices in a moment just to worship you, that we would feel free to interact with one another and to enjoy the fellowship. We would feel free to enjoy the coffee and tea and the food, and especially, Lord, that we would free our minds from distractions and burdens and welcome the message that you have for us today. Amen. So Archers is coming to help us to worship.
Morning, everyone. I'll invite everyone to stand up. We're going to sing a little bit together. This way. cry out for your hand of mercy to heal me. Oh, I am weak, and I need your love to free me. Oh, Lord, my rock, my strength and weakness, come rescue me, oh Lord. One more time. I cry out for your hand of mercy to heal me. Oh, I am weak, and I need your love to free me. Oh, Lord, my rock, my strength and weakness, come rescue me, oh Lord. You are my hope, your promise never fails me, and my desire is to follow you forever. For you are good, for you are good, for you are good to me. For you are good, for you are good, for you are good to me. I cry out for your hand of mercy to heal me. Oh, I am weak, and I need your love to free me. Oh, Lord, my rock, my strength and weakness, come rescue me, oh Lord. You are my hope, your promise never fails me, and my desire is to follow you forever. For you are good, for you are good, for you are good to me. For you are good, yes you are good, yes you are good to me. For you are good, for you are good, for you are good to me. Oh, you are good, yes you are good, yes you are good to me, my Lord. Over the mountains and the sea, your river run with love for me, and I will open up my heart and let the healer set me free. I'm happy to be in the truth, and I will daily lift my hands, for I will always sing when your love came down. I could sing of your love forever. 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 Over the mountains and the sea, your river run with love for me, and I will open up my heart and let the healer set me free. I'm happy to be in the truth, and I will daily lift my hands, for I will always sing when your love came down. I could sing of your love forever. 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 Oh, I feel like dancing. It's foolishness, I know, but when the world has seen the light, that will dance with joy like we're dancing now. I could sing of your love forever. 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 I could sing of your love. Oh, I could sing of your love. Oh, yeah. I could sing of your love forever. I could sing of your love forever. Peace I give to you, joy I offer you, love will live in you as you see your face. Peace I give to you, joy I offer you, love will live in you as you seek my face. Lord, as we see your face, let them see you, let them see you. As we see your grace, let them know you, let them know you. Let them see your eyes, let them see your eyes, let them see your eyes through me. Peace I give to you, joy I offer you, love will live in you as we see your face. Peace I give to you, peace that I give, Lord, that will live in you as we see, Lord, as we see your face. Let them see you, let them see you as we see your grace. Let them know you, let them know you. Let them see your eyes, let them see your eyes, let them see your eyes through me. Let them see your eyes, let them see your eyes, let them see your eyes through me.
Thank you, Arthurs. We'll sing again at the end. If you came in at the last minute, feel free to get some coffee and tea and stuff over there. It's okay to sit with a plate of food in your lap, so just make yourself at home. Do be praying for one another. There's a number of people, regular people here, who are missing or traveling or whatever. Pray especially for Aaron and Deb Groff. Deb's mother passed away, so they are back in the States for 2 weeks. So be praying for them, because I'm sure Deb and her brother have a lot of things they've got to work out for taking care of her father, and just a lot of details, as well as getting back here, because they have a life here as well. So definitely be praying for them. Be praying for Ashish and Daya. So when is the baby due? January? Okay, so be praying for Di, expecting a baby, and just needing strength and so forth for that. So yeah, keep one another in mind. Be praying for one another. Speaking of prayer, if you're new here, you might not know that there's one way to be sharing prayer requests. So we have a WhatsApp prayer group where you can, if you want to join the group and get prayer requests, and you can pray for one another regularly. I mean, now, because we've had people with us that have, left us, there's people all over the world who are actually praying for these prayer requests. But if you just have something that comes up and you would like people in the body to pray for you, this is how you can do it. There's a number on WhatsApp where you can, let your prayer requests be made known. And like I said, there are faithful prayers in this body who will be praying for you about that. One other announcement, I think the only other announcement, it's this. On November 27th, we're planning to have a meal after the service. Back before COVID hit us and we couldn't do a lot of even meeting or having meals together, we used to kind of have a traditional American Thanksgiving meal, at church, even though there's not that many Americans here. It was just kind of a nice thing that we would do. So we're going to hope to do that on the 27th, okay? And not just American Thanksgiving food, so you can bring other kinds of things, I like American Thanksgiving food, but I also like variety, so you can plan to bring some, really, really spice up things if you want. But we will try to have some of those traditional American Thanksgiving foods. Liga will be kind of organizing some of that as we come along, so listen for announcements, okay? I'm hoping to make a green bean casserole that maybe isn't traditional everywhere, but in my family, it was. By the way, we used to have an embassy people, and they had the U.S. Embassy chef who would do the turkey and all of that. So we're not pulling that off this time, but I think we have competent people in this body, and at least a few other Americans who can get a turkey into the oven and do that right. But anyway, that's on the 27th, and so there'll be opportunities for you to contribute for some food. But in any case, be ready to come and have a nice meal together. All right, so anything else that I need to announce? Becky, anything? All right, good. Well, we're turning back to Galatians. And like I started the service, it's kind of a common human reality to look at ourselves, and especially to look at ourselves in comparison to other people or in comparison to some other kind of standard, and to wonder, how much we measure up. And that's certainly true of kids going to school, where, I don't know if it's true of every culture in the world. It's definitely true in America. I think it's true in Western Europe. It's definitely true in Latvia, where now there's plenty of symbols of status and clothing and what kind of telephone you have and what kind of car your parents drive you to school in if you get driven to school. And people notice that. When our Anna was in first grade, she's kind of hyper observant of that kind of thing and style anyway. But she was completely aware of, whether or not her phone, first grade, because in Latvia most first graders have their own phone, whether it measured up, and so, for many years, she's 17 now, but it's still, one way or another, we wonder if we fit in, if we belong, and many of you have come from abroad and you're here and you're meeting new people and you wonder if you're going to fit in. It's a new culture, it's a new school system. It's not always easy to negotiate government bureaucracies, or school bureaucracies. And some of you have faced, do you speak the language? What is wrong with you? Why can't you use a little Latvian and that kind of thing? And there's always that constant temptation to wonder if you measure up or if people are looking down on you and judging you in some way. And most of the people that I talk to here and elsewhere generally are fearful about that. I've only known a few people in my life, a few of my friends who would look at themselves in the mirror and think, I like what I see. I'm pretty much okay. Most of us do not have that strong of self-confidence, okay? And we just have a sense that we don't quite measure up. And often, like I said, that attitude or problem or dysfunction bleeds into our view of God and our relationship with God. You know, and especially if we've come from churches that had lots of rules or lots of standards, you know, where there's this kind of vision of heroic Christianity, you know, and somehow you're expected to measure up to that. You know, you hear stories of missionaries and missionary martyrs, and, you know, recently, you know, is Reformation Day, and Martin Luther did this and his boldness, and, you know, which of us measures up to Martin Luther? Okay, and we're conscious that maybe we don't quite measure up to that, and we think, is God okay with me, or is there something about me, whether it's personally, whether it's the people we come from or the family we come from. You know, we come from the wrong part of the country. You know, one of the things I learned about Latvia, even though it's quite a small country in comparison to where some of you come from, there's the more elite cities and status in Latvia. There's those places of Latvia where most Latvians kind of looked, oh, you're from there, and you've got that accent, you know. And you guys know exactly what I'm talking about and what that, it's everywhere, okay? Do we measure up? Is there something about me that excludes me, you know, from being in the inner circle or the elite? And especially, is there something about me that leaves God kind of wondering, do I really want that person to be a part, or do I want to just keep some space from that person? And this is one of the issues that Paul is dealing with in Galatians, because he's writing to Gentile Christians who are being encouraged that Jesus isn't enough. Okay, they need to add to Jesus. If they're going to really be the people of God, they need to be the people of God like the Jewish people were the people of God, and they've got to measure up to that standard. They've got to do those things, Jesus and these other measurements. Okay, and Paul is trying to tell them why they don't need to do that. In fact, it's desperately important that they not go back that way. And in light of that, we're coming to a passage in Galatians chapter 4, at the end of chapter 4, and I was hoping someone else was going to preach in this passage, that maybe John would be here, or Nenad, or someone else who preaches, because this is it's a weird kind of story, or Paul does something weird with the story here. And I don't, I really like Paul. He's kind of the main person I study in the New Testament, but this is one of my least favorite passages by Paul, okay, because it's like, what he does with this story is a little bit wonky. But I'm going to read what Paul said and then kind of tell the original story and try to explain what Paul is trying to do here, and hopefully to show how we can read ourselves into this story. In any case, Galatians chapter 4, verse 21, Paul says, "Tell me, you who want to be under the law." Okay, so some of these Galatians Christians were like, okay, maybe we've got to add the law to our faith in Jesus. He says, "Aren't you aware of what the law says? It's written that Abraham had two sons, one by the slave woman, the other by the free woman. And his son by the slave woman was born the ordinary way, but his son by the free woman was born as a result of a promise. Also by ordinary way, but also a promise. These things," Paul says, "may be taken figuratively, for the women represent two covenants." And so that's a clue that what Paul is doing with this story is he's trying to draw out a particular spiritual point that's going to go a little bit beyond the basic historical events. So he says, one covenant is from Mount Sinai and bears children who are to be slaves. That's Hagar. Now Hagar stands for Mount Sinai in Arabia, corresponds to the present city of Jerusalem. She's in slavery with her children. But the Jerusalem that is from above is free, and she's our mother. For it is written, 'Be glad, O barren woman who bears no children. Break forth and cry aloud, you who have no labor pains, because more are the children of the desolate woman than of her who has a husband.' Now you brothers are like Isaac," not like Hagar and her son, but you're like Isaac, "who are children of promise. At that time, the son born in the ordinary way persecuted the son born by the power of the Spirit. It's the same now. But what does Scripture say? Get rid of the slave woman and her son. The slave woman's son will never share in the inheritance with the free woman's son. So, brothers and sisters, we're not children of the slave woman, but we're children of the free woman. Now, one of the reasons Paul tells this story is almost certainly because that story about Hagar and Sarah has been used against Paul. Probably these Jewish Christians from Jerusalem have come to these churches, and like I've talked about, they're sort of subverting Paul's message. They're saying, Paul got you this far, but you need to add this. Paul was only partially right, but he's also partially wrong, and so we're here to fix Paul's theology so you get all the pieces straight. And so they're undermining Paul in these churches, and what one of the stories they've used to undermine Paul is this story of Abraham and Sarah and Hagar and Ishmael from the book of Genesis. And so that's almost certainly why Paul feels like he needs to use this story, okay, but he's going to use it in a certain way to make the same point he's making through here. Well, here's the historical story in the book of Genesis, if you don't remember this. Genesis chapter 12, God calls Abraham in the land where he's from. Abraham is 75 years old, and God tells Abraham to leave that home and to go to a place, and at that point, Abraham probably wasn't sure where he was going. You know, when you came to Riga, you at least, it had on your ticket, you're flying to Riga. You knew where your plane was landing. Abraham didn't know where his plane was landing. He just got on the plane, and waited where God was going to put it down. So he's 75, and he comes to the land of Canaan with his family, and there's a series of experiences, that he has there that are good and bad. In many ways, Abraham does some great things. Abraham's got some weaknesses. He's kind of the model of faith, Abraham is, the man of faith, even in Galatians, but he's also got some weak faith. But in any case, as he's there for a while, God says, okay, many nations are going to come from you. You're going to have a multitude of children. Okay? And so Abraham hears that promise, but then he's waiting and nothing happens. And he's noticing, when he gets to land, he's 75 years old. And as the time is going on, he's getting up to 85 years old, and his wife is like 10 years younger. It's a bit late in the game to be having kids. And they knew that even back then, And so God is talking to Abraham about this promise, and Abraham is talking back to God like, I don't see it. Okay, right now, my steward, my chief slave, he's going to inherit everything that I have. I've got no children. And so everything that I have is going to go to the steward of everything that I have. He's going to inherit all of this, Abraham says. And God says, no, it's not going to be that way. You're going to have a son yourself. So he hears that promise, but he's still struggling with it. And it's a rather kind of, it's hard to read these stories from another time and place and culture because, he's not having a son, and Sarah's wondering what's going on. And so Sarah, his wife, comes up with this plan for Abraham to have a son. Okay, and Sarah says, why don't you take my slave Hagar, and you can have a son through him. Okay, that was more or less normal back then. That wasn't a surprising thing to happen back at that time and place, even for someone like Abraham. And so this is really a weird picture. That's a bit of a sick picture if you look at that. Abraham and Sarah and Hagar. Okay, but Abraham's 85 now, and so this is the plan, Sarah's plan. And so Abraham has a son not through Sarah but through Hagar, and his name is Ishmael. Okay, and so he is technically the firstborn son of Abraham. Of course, when you do stupid stuff like that, it's not going to work out well, and so when Hagar is expecting the baby, now she's being all superior over Sarah. And so Sarah, who doesn't seem to be the most pleasant woman on the face of the earth, is kind of persecuting Hagar because now Hagar has a baby through Abraham, and it was Sarah's idea in the first place. But this is the story, okay? But important for the story and for the point Paul is going to make is that wasn't God's plan. Ishmael was not the son of promise, okay? And so God says, I'm going to bless Ishmael. You know, I mean, God said, I'm going to make you a father of many nations, and he's going to do it partially through Ishmael, and Ishmael is going to be the father of 12 Arab tribes, okay, but wasn't the son of promise. So God comes again and talks to Abraham and says, you know, this time next year, you're going to have a son through Sarah. And literally laugh, almost in God's face. No, that doesn't happen. You know, I've not been to medical school, but I don't think that's going to happen. But it's a child of promise, and so Sarah does conceive and have a baby, Isaac. Okay, and then you've got another problem because of this dysfunctional action. You know, Ishmael is a number of years older than Isaac, you know, and so poor Isaac now is the younger brother. Okay, and so this upsets Sarah again. You know, the way that her son Isaac now is supposed to be the heir is being abused by Ishmael, and so Sarah says, Abraham, you got to get rid of Ishmael. I found this work of art just, you know, looking at images. This is an amazing piece of art about this story. This is Abraham saying goodbye to Ishmael. There's Sarah in the background, and there's Hagar, who's got her back turned to this sad scene, and they've got to disappear from this family and nearly die in the desert. Okay? So that's the original story. Okay? Because Isaac was the son of promise. God had a particular plan, and he often is going to choose not the expected one, you know, the literal physical firstborn son, but he's going to choose someone else to carry on the story. So that's the story in the original context that Paul is going to use to make a very different point. Before we get to that, there's just a couple encouraging things, you know, contemplating on that, you know, very dysfunctional family here. And one of them is to use this quote again from Tim Keller that I used at the beginning of this series about our faith. It's not the strength of your faith, but the object of your faith that actually saves you. Abraham did not have perfect faith. He wasn't, you know, he didn't have this strong faith that whatever God said, he just believed it and never doubted. He doubted often, and several times he took the plan into his own hands very foolishly. Okay, but the key to Abraham wasn't his faith, it was God. What was right about Abraham is that his faith was in God. It was weak faith, but it was in God. And that's all God needed, faith in him. And then, you know, this story is just another simple reminder of who God uses. These are the people God uses, like Abraham and Sarah, because this is all God has available. You know, this is what God has to work with, families like that. That's good news. You know, this is who God has to work with, and he's going to do it. Okay, and so you might think, wow, I've got this problem, and I don't have this, and it's like, it doesn't matter. You know, God's doing something. He's going to use these tools. Okay, and once again, if you feel like you don't have, you know, heroic spiritual nature, not many people do. And God has done a pretty wonderful job in a couple thousand years of history to use people who actually had a lot of problems and weaknesses. I mean, you know, Martin Luther might be a hero, but man, he's got an awful lot of blemishes as well. if you want to read, some about his life, some of the language that he used. It's a little bit shocking. Don't let your kids read Martin Luther. Don't let your kids read cartoons that were drawn during the Reformation time. Let me tell you. Seriously. You can try to look those up after the service. But these are the people God uses, like Abraham and Sarah and Isaac. None of them are perfect. This is who God uses. This is how amazing God is, that he accomplishes his plan, and he lets us be a part of it. We don't have to measure up to become a part of it. We just become a part of it like we are. All right. But now back to Paul's use of this story, and we've been looking at this kind of storyline that Paul is using all through Galatians, how he explains the story of God, how he explains the temporary place of the law. It was good for a time and so forth, but there's a bigger picture of what God is doing, and what Paul uses to spiritualize this story is the word promise. Okay, that promise in the original story, Paul is going to use in his sort of retelling of the story to ask the question, who now are the children of promise? What were God's promises? And what is the fulfillment of God's promises supposed to look like? Okay, so that's kind of the key connection in Paul's mind that he makes from the historical circumstances and the way he's going to sort of reinterpret this story to make a particular point. So he makes this comparison between Hagar and Sarah. Okay, and of course, when you look at this chart, this looks like Sarah is a good person. Okay, but again, Paul is spiritualizing this story. Sarah represents something. This is what Sarah represents. This is what Hagar represents. This isn't about the literal Hagar or the literal Sarah. That's going to be very important in a moment, so we don't, misapply stories like this from the Old Testament. Hagar and Sarah represent two kind of systems. And Hagar is a slave. That's from the original story. The child was born according to the flesh. Paul makes Hagar represent present Jerusalem. That's kind of weird. That's not really from the original story. Okay, but he uses that as a way. That's the old way that's not really related to promise. Acting according to flesh, and then Hagar and Ishmael were kind of persecutor of God's people, and they would not inherit. Okay, in the sense that Hagar and Ishmael are not, it's not through them that God's plan is going to unfold. I mean, God loved Hagar and Ishmael, and God blessed Hagar and Ishmael. And Ishmael was the father of many peoples, but it wasn't through Ishmael that God was going to fulfill his plan. Jesus was not going to be the son of Ishmael. Okay, Jesus was going to be a descendant of Isaac. Okay, that's what it means by not inherit. He's not going to get to have that place in the story. But Sarah is free, and her child was through promise, and she represents this Jerusalem above. And this is kind of odd, at least for me as a Western thinker, very analytic. It's not my normal way to speak. But in Paul's world, to think about, there's this physical world and there's a spiritual world that is represented behind that. Plato, the philosopher, kind of taught that behind the physical world there's this ideal world, and Paul is just kind of saying there's this ideal Jerusalem that's not the present physical Jerusalem, it's the spiritual eternal reality, and it's a child of spirit, and this is the one who will inherit. Okay, so this is kind of Paul's retelling of this original story to make a spiritual point, that here Hagar represents the old way that includes the law in the flesh. And here Sarah is going to represent not just the Jewish system, but the new thing that God is doing through the Spirit as a part of promise. Now, before we go any further, I want to make a couple important points about application from stories like this. Keep in mind, Paul is using Hagar and Sarah to represent spiritual realities. Okay, we need to be very careful not to draw a lesson from this in kind of the literal physical world. Okay, so for instance, Ishmael is the father of the Arab people. Okay, is Paul making any kind of judgment about people of Arab descent? No, he is not. He's not making that point whatsoever. Okay, he's making a spiritual point. Okay, we should not make judgments about present people on the face of the earth based on what Paul says here. It's not what he was trying to do. Okay, he was making a particular point. Another example of a danger of reading some biblical stories, especially Old Testament stories, wrongly is in Genesis chapter 11. Okay, if you can remember that chapter, Genesis 10, 11, another sordid story, that would, you would not let your kids watch this story with God's people, what they're doing. You have these three sons of Noah, okay, and in these genealogies, they represent three different lines of people, and one of those three lines was kind of under a curse. Cursed is Ham and all the descendants of Ham. Okay, it's rather strong language, okay? And ever since that time, some people have turned to Genesis 11 to categorize people by, who they descended from, and to make that an absolute permanent judgment about people. It was used in the Old South in America to justify slavery. Okay, it was used that way. Oh, those Africans are descended from this family. They were under a curse, and therefore they deserve to be where they are. It was used, that story was used that way 150 years ago. People using the Bible to justify great injustice. Unfortunately, that kind of reading that story didn't just exist 160 years ago in America. I've met that attitude in Latvia. I've talked to some Latvian Christians. Oh, what about those stories? Doesn't that mean that those people are... No, it doesn't. It doesn't mean that. Okay, one of the things I often say is remember where we are in the story. Genesis 11 had a particular purpose at that point in the story to make a particular point. It was not an absolute judgment about people. It was not that. Okay, that's to misuse that story, to take that story from way back then and think we can superimpose that on how we look at people in the world. That's a wrong way to handle Scripture. Another problem, with that approach is simply this. Jesus changes everything. Whatever people might want to think about Genesis chapter 11 and the point that it made then, when Jesus came, it changed everything. Jesus changes everything about how we look at people. Jesus changes everything about who is and is not acceptable. Okay, Jesus changes everything. Okay, when we read the Bible, we need to keep in mind, especially when we read the Old Testament, but okay, what's going on there, and did something change when Jesus came? Because Jesus changes everything. It's a whole new age, it's a whole new world that Jesus brings in. Okay, Jesus changes everything. And so he changes the way that we see people. Whatever curses you read in the Old Testament, Jesus nullifies them. Okay, Jesus nullifies them. He brings in a whole new reality that we can share in. Okay, so Paul uses the word promise to kind of connect the Old Testament story with the point that he wants to make in his own circumstances. And so that leads to the question then, who are the children of promise? Who now is the reality that Sarah and Isaac represent? Because again, they represent something. Who do they represent? What connection does Paul want to make? Paul quotes here from Isaiah. He says, "Rejoice, barren woman who does not bear. Break forth and shout, you who are not in labor, for more numerous are the children of the desolate than the one who has a husband." Paul quotes that because it relates to Sarah. Sarah was barren for many years and then finally had a child when she was like 90 years old. And God has done this a number of times. You can see this in the Old Testament with a woman who is barren for many, many years, finally has a child, Hannah in the book of Samuel, and then, of course, Elizabeth, the mother of John the Baptist. Okay? And so Paul takes this Isaiah quote, and part of what he's thinking in his mind is this is like Sarah. We see Sarah, especially who Sarah represents, someone who was barren but actually now has all these children. And so in the story, this is where Paul plots that for now I realize you can't read that font, okay? The point isn't to be able to read that because you probably have to have really good eyesight. I put it there because I want you to see how it fits in the story. Why Paul quotes it here, okay? Because he's seeing that Isaiah promise is being fulfilled now with the Gentiles coming into God's plan. Okay, that's the connection Paul is making as he sees all these Gentile believers finding Christ and coming into the kingdom. He's thinking, oh yeah, that's what God said. God said there would be a multitude of people. Again, like barren women have children. Children will be coming out of the woodwork. Be rising spontaneously suddenly. And it can't be explained, too easily. So Paul is thinking that this Isaiah quote is being fulfilled now with the Gentiles coming in to the kingdom. All right? So that's a single quote that Paul puts in Galatians, but Paul is thinking about the whole story of Isaiah. I don't believe in reincarnation myself, okay? But some people say Paul, if reincarnation was true, Paul was the reincarnation of Isaiah. It's like he's got a lot of the same ideas, and Paul constantly quotes Isaiah. Okay, and so Paul is thinking about how Isaiah tells this story. And so, for instance, Paul quotes from Isaiah chapter 54. To remember what's in Isaiah chapter 53? Okay, the story of the suffering servant. Which in Paul's mind is talking about Jesus the Messiah. In the original context in Isaiah, sometimes the servant kind of represents Israel, but sometimes it seems to represent an individual who takes on the sin and the punishment of the people in order to fulfill the purpose of the people. It's Isaiah chapter 53. And in Paul's mind, yeah, that's what faithful Messiah Jesus did. He was a suffering servant who took on our sin and died in our place to advance God's plan. Okay, and so then that leads to Isaiah 54, the incoming of this multitude of people that are not born in the natural way. That is, they're not just natural-born Jewish people. Okay, it's not just people born physically in a certain family. In fact, that's not the plot. It's not the plan anymore. So Isaiah 53, the suffering servant, and then Paul sees Isaiah 54 as being fulfilled with the blessing to the Gentiles who are now righteous by faith like Abraham was. And then that brings us to a couple chapters later in Isaiah, and I'm going to need to turn there because I can't. Isaiah 56, verse 7. Well, go back to verse 3. Let no foreigner who has bound himself to the Lord say, the Lord will surely exclude me from his people. And let not any eunuch complain, I am only a dry tree. Here now, that's a little more readable. Look at this again. Because you're in there, we're all in there, in at least one sense. Let no foreigner who has bound himself to the Lord say, the Lord will surely exclude me from his people. Okay, we are, in the terms of Isaiah, those foreigners. I mean, in Isaiah's time, in Paul's time, we could not enter into the temple. There'd be an outer court of the Gentiles. We could go that far, but then there'd be a gate, and literally above the gate, there'd be a warning. You know, if you're a Gentile and you pass through this gate, your life is over. Okay, it's penalty of death for a Gentile to go through that gate, you know, into the closer parts of the temple. Foreigners were excluded. But Isaiah already prophesied, let not the foreigner say that anymore. The Lord will exclude me from his people. And let not any eunuch complain, I'm only a dry tree. In Old Testament times, there were, a lot of restrictions about who could get into the temple and be a fully functioning member of the people of God, and eunuchs were excluded. Okay. Men whose genitalia were harmed or whatever, or made choices like often happened back then. Because of that physical blemish, they were not allowed into the temple. Why? I'm not sure why. Except at that time it was God's way of trying to communicate, look, this temple is holy and not just anyone can get in here. And at that point in the story, that was the message that had to be communicated. God is holy, and we can't just take it for granted that everyone can come in here, go into the temple drinking our coffee. We can come here in church and drink our coffee. You wouldn't be walking through the temple courts, drinking your coffee and eating your croissant or whatever. Okay, because the temple was special, and it had rules to represent that. And in Old Testament times, eunuchs were one of those category of people who were not worthy. But Isaiah already promised that day is going to come to an end. Whatever your blemish, whatever your weakness, whatever it is you think you are lacking, it no longer matters. It's no longer a barrier. It's no longer a hindrance. God no longer sees that. He doesn't look at you and think, oh, you're a foreigner. You're this or you're that. That's not how God sees you. We look at one another and we categorize people. Where are you from and what do you do and so forth. In some places, what is your income and what does your father do and what is your educational level. And these are all the things that consume us, and we label people and categorize people. And God simply doesn't. It's good news. God does not judge people by human terms. The way that we judge people, God just doesn't do that. And what to us appear as limitations no longer matter to God. Let no foreigner who's bound himself to the Lord say, the Lord will surely exclude me. And let not the eunuch complain, I'm only a dry tree. Isaiah chapter 56, it's really a worthwhile chapter. Read and reread this little part in the first section of Isaiah chapter 56. A few verses later, it says, these I will bring to my holy mountain and give them joy in my house of prayer. Their burnt offerings and sacrifices will be acceptable on my altar. For my house will be called a house of prayer for all nations. Do you remember when that was quoted in the New Testament? My house will be a house of prayer for all nations. It was when Jesus got angry. Okay, remember when There's a big festival, and people were in the temple trading and that kind of thing. And what all of that did is it set up a barrier for the Gentiles, people who wanted to find the God of Israel, and they come to the temple, and there's all this stuff going on that's creating a barrier. And it made Jesus angry. I've talked about Paul being angry in the book of Galatians. Paul is angry for the same reason Jesus was angry. It's the exact same reason. Paul's anger reflects the anger of Jesus. It's anger at anything that excludes anyone from finding God. Paul wants the whole body, wants everyone who God loves to become a part of God's plan, to know God. He wants there to be no artificial barriers to that. It made Jesus angry, and it was making Paul angry that people are trying to do this with these new Christians and to say, you don't measure up unless these particular rules you keep. You don't belong unless you do this. And so Paul has this strong reaction. The sovereign Lord declares, in Isaiah 56:8, the sovereign Lord declares, he who gathers the exiles of Israel, I will gather still others to them besides those already gathered. And once again, here we are. This community is a direct fulfillment of that. I will gather still others, and here we are gathering. What God said he was going to do, his promises, he's fulfilling it. Isn't it amazing? He's fulfilling it through us. Okay. You didn't come this morning thinking you were going to be a fulfillment to a promise in the book of Isaiah, but you really are. You are participating in what God is doing. Okay, and we're a sign of that. Well, just two simple thoughts I want to leave you with, and I'm done in a moment. And number one, once again, personally, I want to assure you of God's place for you. There's not a single thing about you. Not a single thing about you that would put God off from welcoming you. Now, I'm not saying that everything that we do is okay. As we go through Galatians, we're going to find there's a lot of things that are not okay. Abraham was not okay. Sarah was definitely not okay. Those guys were not okay. Their marriage was not okay. Their families were not okay. Nevertheless, God loved them and chose them and was in a relationship with them and used them. Look, we're all something. We're all blank Christians. And I've had debates with people. Can you be blank? Can you be this kind of Christian? Can you be this? And fill in the blank. Can you be a sinful Christian? Can you be? Well, we are. Okay, we are. Okay, don't deny it. We're all blank Christians. We've all got hang-ups and struggles and temptations. We're all that. Okay, but God knew that all along, and God welcomes us. God welcomes us. But then consequently, we need to welcome others. And I'm probably preaching to the choir here because this is, I think, we're a welcoming church, but it's vital that we never lose our welcome to others who might be very different than us. Not just in color of skin. I think that's no longer a problem in this church, but whatever it might be, economic level or whatever, some people maybe can't use English well or whatever, that we never let anything put a barrier between us and other people. There should never be someone who comes here and feels like I don't quite fit in. In some places in the world, in fact, a lot of places in the world, there's sometimes a missionary strategy that says if you want to plant a new church, what you need to do is to decide on who your target is going to be. And you need to have a very clear target group. And you need to target that one kind of people, because the reality is most people want to worship with people who are like them. Okay, so if you decide, that you're in a community with, white upper middle class people, then you start a white middle class church and you design everything for white upper middle class people, because white upper middle class people, want to worship with other people like that. And it's not just white upper middle class people, but it's, generally start for one category of people where everyone more or less looks alike, because more people will come if you have a very tight demographic. And in a sense, it's true. Big churches grow that way. People have started churches targeting a very narrow group. Okay, it's a good strategy, except it's not Jesus. Jesus is not part of that strategy. I mean, who in the world does Jesus feel comfortable worshiping with? Us? He's the Son of God and he comes to earth. Talk about not fitting in. That's Jesus. Think about those 12 disciples he spent all that time with. Can you imagine Jesus just being frustrated? He was frustrated like moment after moment. What in the world am I doing with these guys? But that's always been Jesus. That's how Jesus operates. He's not looking for people who are like him, because no one is. So Jesus changes everything. He changes everything about your acceptance to God. Your acceptance to God depends wholly on Jesus Christ. If he is worthy, you can be worthy. And the acceptance of others depends wholly on Jesus Christ. If they are worthy in Jesus, then they are worthy with us. Thank you, Lord, that people like us can be caught up into your good work, into your good news. I pray that by faith we would accept that and we would rest in that. We would rest in your love for us. And again, I pray, Lord, that you would give us your Spirit to be a welcoming community so that people can find Jesus in us. Amen. Arturs is coming for one more song.
It's up to you. Yep. In the crushing, in the pressing, you are making new wine. In the soil, now surrender, you are breaking new ground. In the crushing, in the crushing, in the pressing, you are making new wine. In the soul, now surrender, you are breaking new ground. You are breaking new ground. So I yield to you and to your your careful hand. When I trust in you, I don't need to understand. Make me your vessel, make me an offering, make me whatever you want me to be. I came here with nothing, all you have given me. Jesus, bring your wine out of me. In the crushing, in the pressing, you are making new wine. In the soul, now surrender, you are breaking new ground. You are breaking new ground. So I yield to you and to your careful hand. When I trust in you, I don't need to understand. Make me your vessel, make me an offering, make me whatever you want me to be. I'm here with nothing but all you have given me. Jesus, bring your wine out of me. Make me your vessel, make me an offering, make me whatever you want me to be. I came here with nothing but all you have given me. Jesus, bring your wine out of me. Where is new wine, there is new power, there is new freedom. The kingdom is here. I lay down my old flames to carry your new fire today. Where there is new wine, there is new power, there is new freedom. The kingdom is here. I lay down my old flames to carry your new fire today. To make me your vessel, make me an offering, make me whatever you want me to be. I came here with nothing, all you have given me. Jesus, bring your wine out of me.
Tell you that they're usually not long, but that would be a lie. Okay, so sorry about that, but thanks for being here. Don't take off. Definitely meet some people, okay? There's some great people to meet, so do it, all right? Have a great week. God is with you, and God loves you and accepts you, okay?